Well, welcome to the Week 2 mini lecture. This week is really about how do costs behave. This is coming from Chapter 3 of the Cornerstones textbook, so obviously make sure you read that. It's very important. But the main part of the chapter is really about the behavior of costs. And we have lots of behaviors to be aware of when it comes to cost. Obviously, the chapter has a lot of the definitions, but I wanted to kind of go over the graphs with you to kind of see that visual of the behavior of cost. So first of all, we have a fixed cost. And remember that a fixed cost does not change based on the level of production. It is what it is. And examples would typically be something like rent or a lease payment, insurance, things like that are very common, that they are just the same no matter how much level of activity we have. I love to use the example of a class building at a university. If the university is paying a lease payment or a rent payment for that building, the lease or the rent is the same no matter what. If there's one student in the building or 1,000 students, that doesn't change. That's a great example of a fixed cost. So variable cost then changes literally based on the volume of production, and the chapter uses an example of something called voice coils. So just as we make more of a product, there's a direct linear behavior of the variable costs that go with that. So if I make one item, I buy one, the dollar amount of material to make that one item. If I make two, and so on. So there's a direct correlation between volume and the cost of making that product. So that's a variable cost. And then sometimes, though, costs can be non-linear. They don't move in that perfect 45-degree angle, and that's based on volume pricing and things like that too. So just know typically that's not exactly the pattern we typically get, because sometimes I can reduce that slope, because if I buy a certain volume of quantity of material from my supplier, they may reduce the price and so on. Then at some point, as I increase production, then I have to increase capacity. So that might get the curve to move up like that. Obviously, that curve can move in almost any direction, but those are just a couple of examples. I also want to talk about the relevant range. So keep in mind that all companies have capacity, right? No one company has all the capacity in the world. There's always a fixed amount of capacity. And so the relevant range is that costs behave a certain way within the relevant range being what our capacity is. So to increase capacity usually means I have to add machinery, buy a new building, increase fixed costs, and so on. Now, the good part about that, though, the bigger a company is, then it gets typically better purchasing power, more efficiencies are gained, and so on. So that can reduce some of the variable costs that go into something. But this is just an explanation of what the relevant range would be, and that our assumptions for cost behavior are only good within a certain relevant range. Then we have something like a fixed cost, and a fixed cost has both a component of a fixed piece and a variable piece. I like to use the example of like a cell phone data plan. You just to have a phone and have a certain amount of data, there's a fixed cost to that. Your bill really doesn't change a lot month per month. It's pretty much locked in. However, if you get kind of close to your data limit, you can buy more data, right? And so then we've got a variable piece to it. So if you kind of get to the point where I'm halfway through my month and I get a message from my provider saying I'm almost out of data, you can choose to buy more. Then it's going to behave more in a variable piece. There's a fixed cost just to have your cell phone and have your plan. The variable piece is what you spend above and beyond that. So just an example of that. Then step fixed costs kind of just give you a relevant range within a certain amount of capacity. So this would be the example they're using with this one is engineering hours. Every engineer that I hire costs me $50,000. And every engineer can handle 2,500 change orders. So if I know that I'm going to have more than 2,500 change orders, really what I have to do then is increase capacity, and that's hiring one more person. So now my cost is $100,000, but I can handle up to 5,000 change orders and so on. So that's what they call a step fixed cost. It's not that perfect 45-degree angle. The cost changes based on step behavior. Okay, so cost behavior is really important for this chapter. Of course, make sure you read it, and you'll be in really good shape.